Yeah, right. Romeo Salvador is the Chief Engagement Officer of Romeo Speaks, whose primary mission is to help the next generation wake up and dream, discover their voices, and unleash their maximum potential for the good of the world. After nearly a decade leading award-winning sales teams, Romeo recognized where his real passion lies: students and educators. His mantra, "Every kid can be a hero," is the driving force behind every talk and workshop he gives. Through his creative and unique story-driven approach, Romeo awakens audiences to their possibilities while catalyzing connections between student, parent, and teacher. In 2003, he graduated from the University of Maryland with a BA in economics. He then went to get his MBA. He lives in North Atlanta with his wife and 2 children. Ladies and gentlemen, Romeo Salvador.
Just to give you some context really quickly, I'm talking to a room full of educators in the evening. Principals, majority of teachers.
Okay. Hope you're getting food.
I feel as if it's an extreme disadvantage for me tonight. Let me explain. A couple weeks ago, I was invited to a teacher summit in Lexington, North Carolina at a vineyard. And the whole time I was talking, the teachers were drinking wine. So I'm not sure if I knocked it out of the park or if they were all just a little bit high on life during my whole talk. But my point is that in any event, tonight, if things start to go south, if you start to get disinterested, I know exactly what I'm going to grab. So, with all that being said, it is such a privilege for me to be in this room tonight, surrounded by so many phenomenal educators, or as I like to refer to you as, heroes, and just a treat to be here tonight. So as I started my preparation for this evening, per the usual, I sat down on my computer, grabbed my pen, my pad, and I thought to myself during my idea generation stage, what does this room need to hear? So naturally, I leveraged the queen of all research tools, Mother Google herself. Thank you, Judy, for stealing my joke. And as I went into Google, I went in to type, why teachers are awesome. But as you know, Google auto-populates and auto-fills your phrases based on the most popular searches. So before I could get to the word awesome, when I went to go type that A for awesome, the word that came up was exhausted. So I quickly backspaced, gave my second attempt, and this second time around the word that came up was leaving. So clearly a third time had to be the charm. So I quickly backspaced again, and the third time the word that came up was quitting. Why teachers are exhausted, why teachers are leaving, and why teachers are quitting. What on earth can I give or offer a room full of people who feel so overutilized, so worn out, so under-resourced, so underpaid, and so underappreciated? Well, I think I may have found that answer. But before we walk down that road together, I wanted to make a really bold statement. And I need you to know that what I'm about to say, I consider myself in this category with all of you as well. I may not have a PhD in education, I may not have a master's degree in teaching, but I consider myself through my teaching, my coaching, my speaking, my training, an educator. So with that, I believe that the greatest challenge facing educators today is what I like to call identity amnesia, or a crisis of memory. We have forgotten who we are. We have completely forgotten what it is that we bring to the table in terms of our giftedness, our skills, and our abilities. So tonight, we are going to recover that lost identity together, and we are going to remember who we are by talking about the 3 things that each and every one of you does and why it matters so much. I remember like it was yesterday. I was in the hallways of my high school in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. I was in the 10th grade, so to date that has to be 1995-ish. And I remember my teacher, Mr. Sutton, came up to me and he said, Romeo, I need you to enter this speaking competition for the fine arts. And I said, I really appreciate that suggestion, Mr. Sun. It sounds pretty cool. Not a chance. I have no interest in it whatsoever. So over the next couple days, he just kept badgering me, and he kept badgering me. Romeo, you need to enter this competition. I said, sure, why not? So on 24 hours notice, I stood before 3 judges, and I fell on my face. I forgot what I was going to say. It was a complete train wreck. But when I think back to that day, because after that, the very next year, I ended up placing #1 in the state in that competition. That year, I ended up getting 2nd place in the district. In my senior year, I got 4th place nationally. And here I am today. When I look back to that day, Mr. Sutton did the very first thing that each and every one of you does that you may have forgotten. And that is, he sparked magic. #1, each and every one of you sparks the magic of belief and confidence in your students. Another example, I was in my college keyboarding class in the 11th grade. That was typing. And the quiz was, type this sentence in 60 seconds. Go to the grocery store and get peaches, lemons, and limes for your teacher's sangria. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what it said. I forgot exactly what it said. But needless to say, when that clock started, I completely froze and I bombed it. Left the class defeated and dejected, and my teacher, Mrs. Merritt, came up to me and she said, Romeo, what happened? I said, I was just extremely nervous. She said, why don't you come back in after class and take it again? I came back in after class, took it, aced it, and they ended up getting the highest grade point average in her class by the end of the year. Mrs. Merritt sparked the magic of confidence in myself. That's what each and every one of you does. #2, I remember it like it was yesterday. About a year ago, I was putting my son to bed. And as many of you know, if you are parents, you know it can be one of the hardest times of the day. And as I put him to bed and I was leaving his room, I started to hear some whimpering. And I started to hear as if he was crying, he was sniffling. So I came back in his room and I peeked through his door and I said, buddy, what's the matter? Is everything okay? He says, Dad, I'm fine. I said, son, what's the matter? So I went back in his room. I sat down beside him and I said, son, what's the matter? And he said, Dad, somebody today at school told me that I was stupid and I didn't matter at all. So I continued down the road for the next couple of minutes, as all parents do, and I tried to reassure him. I put my hand on his chest and I said, son, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You cannot commit to memory. You can't believe anything that these kids are saying. You're gonna battle this every grade. You're gonna have someone that's gonna have an opinion of you. You've gotta let it roll off your back. It's not true. It doesn't say anything about you. It's not who you are. And as I put my hand on his chest, it was the first time that I had realized, it wasn't the first time I reassured one of my kids when they were having a bad day or they were emotional about something. But it was at that moment that for the first time it hit me that in that moment, literally, I had my son's heart in the palm of my hand. #2, educators, you perform surgery. You transplant your heart into the hearts of your students. In the midst of feeling worn out and burnout, in the midst of all of their anger and the stories they're bringing from home and their impatience and their struggles with their academics, you perform surgery by displaying the qualities of compassion and care and unconditional love that your kids so desperately need from you. So I have another point, but I think that's good to stop there.
Argument's sake, Romeo, what was the third point?
Run toward.
Thank you.
You run toward the mess. And I use an illustration of when that guy broke his leg in the national semifinal, Kevin Ware for Louisville when they were playing Duke. I remember noticing it was insane that his coach, his teammates, the fans, the officials, everyone turned away from him, but there was 2 people that actually left the bench and ran toward the mayhem of his broken leg, and it was the trainers. So I use that as an example to say you run toward the unpredictability and the mess that your kids bring into the classroom. So
You're good, thank you.
Go, can I go?
Go.
Romeo, I got lost at the very beginning when you say I know what to grab. I didn't know what you were grabbing.
I got a little lost there too.
I was
Wine,
lost.
the wine.
Yeah, I got lost there.
Okay.
Also, you sniff.
Okay.
And you may not hear it, but people may hear it and think you have that sniff part of thing going on. I love the Google search picture story. The thing that it did not work for me, and I think it goes back to the power way, is that you somehow painted a separateness of, like, I'm not an educator in the way that you are an educator. So when you made that separate, I was like, well, you don't know about really what I go through, right? So then when you started telling me about, I'm going to give you some things that, could really help you. Also what I got was everything, when I love this story, right? So I was like, I'm there with you, like, okay, great. So how am I going to not want to quit? How am I not going to be exhausted? And then you said to me, you spark magic because of someone else. So it's still, I'm giving myself away to other people. And I'm like, that's what's put me here in the first place, is that I'm giving myself away. And there's nothing that's fueling me back in that wants me to stay in. That's just what goes on. Now, I'm not an educator, so I don't know if that, like, rah, you spark the magic, get back in there, give them one for the Gipper, like, really works and inspires them. But that's not inspiring to me, because I'm doing that and I'm feeling worn out doing that. So that's my, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Sam. Michael.
Okay. Like the intro, it was about your listeners. The Google search story, I like that. Really like the identity amnesia. I think it's a really good catchphrase. Good story about failing. Yeah, when you talk about your story about your success, you started with your failing, and I think that makes you more human. I really like that. The thing that I didn't get was, you said, and bullet number 2, and then you went to a story. You didn't say
Sure.
what it was.
That's a complete mistake.
Does that make
I wanted to
sense?
go into the illustration.
I figured that, but yeah. And yeah, great energy.
Thanks, Mike.
I'll speak. I think you could tell me like fail hay. I'm like, I listen to you, I'm kind of like, I got a little lost in some of the personal stories. To me, they felt a little wrong. And then, or maybe there was an educator story that was a little more relatable to the group.
That's good stuff.
If you know somebody, but because you have been an educator, right? In your previous, we're all educators, really,
Sure.
but like you said, you don't have to point out that you don't have a PhD or
That's important.
a
You
master's
use that line all the
degree.
time. If you read that.
Yeah, you are an educator, but
Now, I have a quick question, Judy, for everybody. So by omitting the PhD in education, master's degree in teaching, you're trying to include yourself with them. Would you still utilize the phrase, I believe the greatest challenge we're facing today as educators is that we? You still think you can get away with saying we?
absolutely.
Oh,
I think so,
yeah,
absolutely, I should about
You
it.
have to be inclusive. But
Yeah,
instead of protrusive.
Yeah, so anyway, that's, to me, it was a little bit of that taking away your thunder, because you've already said, I'm not this, or I'm not that, so how am I gonna connect to you? Why should I listen to you, kind of thing. Although you tell a great story, so I want to keep on listening, because your delivery is really good. So.
So good.
Okay, you want to go last?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, I really like your voice, your gestures, your overall delivery. I thought it was very good. I love the way that you use stories in order to make points. The very beginning troubled me as it did, Sandy and some others as well. I would just think about trying to make a dramatic point to grab everyone's attention rather than going through and taking that time just to introduce them. I would almost like try to say something really bold, and really grab them by their throats, and then maybe come back and say, you know, I'm really glad to be here, or something along that line. Because if you're talking to them at night, they're tired, they're sleepy, and everything along that line, and that open is just going to put them to sleep. I say, you know, make them slam down their phones, wake awake, you know, get the cop habits out of the way. And so, in your perspective, I don't know what that is, but just kind of think about how you could really grab them by the throat to start, especially if you're talking to them at night.
Yeah.
Great. So good.
So for me, I like the 3 points. I'm wondering if there is some way to connect, pull a thread through the 3. So you've got spark magic, so the whole magic thing might be kind of interesting. And then you've got performed surgery, so now I've moved out of the magician realm, I'm into the doctor realm. And then you got you run toward the mess. So now I'm a first responder, I'm a custodian. I mean, there's a whole lot of images that come up. So I don't know what it is, but I'm just wondering if there's a thread that you can build through those 3. Might be something to think about. I just, you and I've had a lot of sidebar conversations, and you know I love your energy. I think you have an incredible presence. I love the fact that you acted out the whole story with your son in his room. I would stage that a little bit more. I know this is kind of a hard place to do that, but really think through your staging, because I think that has a real impact for you that it might not have for others. And you're always going to be on a big auditorium stage, right? So you're going to be usually in a high school gymnasium or auditorium environment, so you'll have a lot of room to work with. I love your stories. I felt as though I did feel like they were a little bit long on the point, and I didn't feel it was necessary to talk about the awards.
Yeah.
I think that stole something. Yeah, so
Which
like,
ones?
so like the speech thing, right? So I went to state and then I went to national. Like, so those are great things, and that's really part of the story, I know. But it can inadvertently kind of feel like it's a bragger's
Ego
element.
stroke.
Yeah, it's an ego stroke. So just think about that. Is there a way to soften it? And is there a way to bring the point back and make the teacher the hero even more? That's the point of the story in the first place. So is there a way to tie that back and bring them in? So you had some really good stuff in the mix, and I think that's all I got.
Romeo, ready for this? I'm gonna take you down a different road.
Nah.
They're going down 75, I've already been down through 20, all right? All right, so first of all, Romeo is a cool name. Okay, so use it, that's all. No, we said that before, but, a couple things. I love your presence, all right? Take your hands out of your pocket. Thank you. All right, so find something to do with that other hand out there. All right, that's all right. I think your story is dynamite. I'm an educator, okay? I took from the educator. You judged your educators right at the beginning, and you lost more than 3/4 of that audience. Boom, just like that. You lost them. And then there's a nighttime. Because themselves, there's a lot of judging going on. Okay? Just watch that, okay? Because you want, and there's a fine line, humility and pride, all right? And then you lose. I've lost audiences like that in the beginning, and then I tell you, it was painful. It was painful because when I realized that nobody was there, I was in a room by myself. All right, and even though there were 200 people there, I was in the room by myself, and I realized I lost them. That is a devastating point. All right, then try to bring them back. You got to watch, because some of those people out there, I know they're exhausted. I know some of them's on quit, but then you're going to get those people out there and going to say, "I'm not exhausted. I don't quit. I love what I do. You know, I enjoy being. I enjoy working with the children and everything else." Just be careful of dancing around that. Okay, you've got all the framework there. The material is there. We just like Judy, we have to start shaving it down, okay? When you start talking about your story and the competition, I would actually break out in 1995, all right, in a small town of so-and-so, this and the other. And so I wanted to know who Sutton was. All right? I never got a picture of this guy, okay? For him to do what he did and have an impact, he had no identification, all right? And so within that story, I need to know just a little bit more. So there's a lot of fluff you can cut out of there, and a lot of really super meaning, all right, what you're talking about. The 3 points, I asked you for the 3 points themselves, but I think when you were saying something about the 3 points, you need to try to find 3 more power phrases to bring those together, because those 3 points, they're never gonna walk away. Okay, they're not gonna remember, okay? They need something that they're gonna be hanging on to, all right? And if so, they're gonna remember 1 or 2 points, all right? But I like the way you believe in your students. Boom, or belief of the students, that's what I heard. All right, and immediately I run up, because that's one of the criteria from an educator, is belief in our students, because it's not about us, it's about the student. And so your second line itself says you perform surgery, complete opposite. So we have to find a way to doctor up, okay, that second line to make it a little bit more engaging to the first. So they go, 1 was this, 2 was that, 3 was here. So they're going to make that connection. Remember, our audience is still on 3rd grade level. Okay? And if we had lost them a little bit again, because, hey, that's not me, I don't do this, I love my kids, especially now with the types of educators coming here, we're seeing individuals themselves on a generational basis. All right, and so the individuals that could be in that room, you could have what? GI sound generations, you could have baby boomers, and you could have millennials in there. And so within that, you don't want to lose that group. And that's the toughest thing to manage out there between the groups, between the generations. I mean, you had some great stuff in it. You use story. I think story itself could be molded down a little bit, okay? I think itself, we were talking about hands and heart, but you're at 1 speed too as well. You got to find some variation. You got to use the room, use your variants of speech, all right? And that's what Jim will help out too as well. When you start using, you were 1 speed. You guys feel you use 1 speed all the time, just go right down the line, and just if you some of the stories that if you breathe a little bit more, all right, you'll keep their attention. You'll keep them going. Because think about an educator, what an educator does all day. They take their entire world, student by student by student by student. So their whole day is like little stories that happen all over the place. Okay? And so you got to give these folks time to breathe. Right? So you have to know that audience. And so once you know the audience out there, you go, okay, let me tell you where you've been. Especially if this is a late night speech and their dinner and they got a couple of grapes in their system. Okay, and so they could get, but I think, and I know you got the material there, without a doubt, because you come from that same grapevine. All right, and so it's just coming down and really getting down to the level. I said, slow down just a little bit, be more conversational. All right, because the point was like, and you said, let me bring you down to earth. Let me see exactly what it works. I know what we go through every day. I know what we've been. I know that people themselves, I know the students are working, and sometimes it's real hard, right, to develop that kind of love, that relationship. Right? And what we do is, and I think you've got, it's all there. It's just now how you're going to tone it down and what you're going to be able to pull out of it. All right, that's going to continually engage that group. All right, because it was never about you. And I think your introductions, I think from an introduction standpoint, get rid of all the PhD stuff, and I did this, and my children did that, and everything else. Just tell me a little bit about what you were telling me, okay? And explain itself as like a segue. An introduction is just that, getting you into what I'm going to be talking about, okay? And it's the engagement is right there. Your audience themselves is not hearing that. I got a PhD in this. I've got in my real estate world, I've got every designation known to man and woman out there, okay? And I put it up there, and I tell people that if you remember, what was his name? Car guy, speaker, long time ago. Jim Ziegler. Jim Ziegler did this when he turned around. He said, I have an HSG. HSG, what is that? A high school graduate. And I use that every once in a while. And sometimes it hits, sometimes it's funny. But I also use ETC. What does ETC mean? Et cetera. Because I ran out of room. The rest of them down there. But you find a way to bring humor into it too as well. And so there's got to be a fine line or balance between that story, the content, the humor, and entertainment. Okay? And when Dan Thurman brought, I'm trying to think of what Dan mentioned in his open speech for National, and I say National, but there was a gentleman he brought in that talked about the story, how that has a certain way. Get a hold and talk to Dan Thurman too as well, and watch him. Get a chance, opportunity to listen to Dan and how he is really crafts his keynote. How his keynote is, there's peaks and valleys and how he does. We all do the same thing. And we try to find some of us are more spontaneous to bring that humor out, all right? And then some of us themselves we have to really work on, all right? But that through that story, the kind of humor and entertainment brings out the richness of what you're bringing to the group as a professional, or as a point of contact. And really will open the door giant sense. Both of you have some great content, great story. And it's just a matter of how you're going to pull it out, prod it, and put it in certain places. Story goes in a certain place. I think you were right. I wanted to hear the point number 2 before you got to the story. But when you got to the story itself, there was this long introduction to the story, and you lost it again. You know? And so I think it's just, it's arranging things and start cutting it out. You're going to find out that even though you're cutting words out, you're cutting some of the speech out, you're going to find out within the breathing, you're not going to lose any time at all. Okay? And you'll be more engaged, the audience will be more engaged with you because of the fact itself. They're now enjoying what you're doing. I want them to enjoy the story. Okay? Remember, I think, Chris, what was it last time? We were talking about Nando Parado. I talked about the Nando Parado story. Everybody knows who Nando Parado was. Nando Parado was one of these sole survivors of the West Indies crash. Remember the movie Alive? Okay? We were all in a national convention, Jim Dawson, myself, Steve Cohen, we were all sitting in the back of the room, all right? And Nando had a lunchtime speech. Right? And his lunchtime speech was talking about what happened in the West Indies crash. So he's got pictures up there and everything else, and talking about the crash, what happened, you know, he's talking about his story and everything else like this going down. Nando told you he had to eat those people to survive without telling you he ate those people to survive. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the crafting of what, especially the lunchtime speech, you know, you're going, yeah, great, hard, you know, you want to do something like that. But Nando crafted, not the most eloquent speaker in the world, all right, but Nando crafted the story, all right, that made it so engaging. I looked around the room and I said, Jim, what are these people doing? And everybody was sobbing, everybody was crying, their emotions were all over the place. This is lunchtime. Everybody, you can see all their plates were pushed ahead, all right, probably for obvious reasons, but they were all, the plates were pushed ahead. But I said, look at the entire room. He pulled an emotional string out of these people himself, the entire room of 5,000 people that I had never seen done before. And I was like, holy crap. All right, and so Jim turned around and he says, I know what they're thinking. He says, we're all trying to find something that would top what he went through. All right, so we can do, now you're in a room of ego, right?
Yeah.
And we're all trying to find this, and I watched the whole entire room change. All right, and so within your words, the ability to do that, that's what you want to be able to control. I'm saying that you can control the emotion, the physical and emotional, spiritualizing how people are seeing and receiving the words, which is going to be huge. All right, I think both have great content, super. It's just how you go to align it.
That's the hard part.
It is. It's not
You
easy.
know, I was like,
And I think it's definitely hard in this
It's a lot
setting.
easier.
I think it's definitely hard in this setting with that time period and.
Sure it is.
Yeah, and
Sure it is.
a setting of peers, I think it's actually definitely hard.
I had a question about the humor aspect real quick. There
Sure.
isn't a time that I've delivered and they were all drinking wine where the place doesn't get stitches. They love that. But then my follow-up to that, when I say, you know, still not quite sure if I knocked it out of the park or if it was just because they were all wasted, drunk, inebriated, high on life. I think wasted is like drugs. Drunk might be trigger someone, and then inebriated might be too big. High on life works.
I think that's the other way, because you want to stay, it's very tough, you want to stay up and positive, because believe it or not, it's motivational, inspirational, somewhere along the lines you got that. But I think what you're